Hello. I wanted to thank you each for being a part of our intensives and also for supporting one another and supporting us as your teachers as we go through this together. With all of our backgrounds being so different, I knew that I was in for something special when I started working with Naropa, and the amount of growth and learning that I've gained at this point has been amazing as well. And so I wanted to thank you for that and share with you a few things that I've done. I'd love to hear your feedback as well on ways that you might help with goal setting in more short-term systems with teens and adults also. So I was going to review some of the goals. I'll keep this presentation at 15 minutes or shorter, but give you an overview, and then please, within our class or after our class, feel free to email me or call me at any time as well to process through and discuss your thoughts, feelings, resources, and so on with me, and hopefully I can share some ideas with you as well. So one of the things that I did, this goes back to that mission I'm possible piece. It's important, right? It is important for all individuals to find meaning and purpose in what they do. And I think we're really blessed, typically in our field, as counselors, as healers, as supports, as teachers, to feel a great sense of purpose. I know I've always felt very blessed by that. One of the things I've done is this short activity that I was going to walk you through in a very brief fashion, which was looking at, how can we release things that no longer serve us, embrace the things that we still hold near and dear to ourselves and our future, create our vision and mission, and create a plan to get there. So a big part of short-term or solution-focused counseling is that plan piece. Many individuals might have one or two counseling sessions paid for through their employer, or if you're in a school where maybe you're lucky and you've got 30 minutes with a student. So what can you do in that time? You can't go as deep, surely. But if we can get a good basis on a vision for what they're looking for and steps to get there, and then hopefully maybe you can check in again, that's really important. And the other piece is the more that we can give resources to one another. So I put out a piece of paper where you all can list interests, side hobbies, passions, backgrounds, areas of expertise. That's going to be super important. So a big part when I'm doing a very short-term counseling of a session or two with someone is giving them some resources to move forward. So that could be books, that could be support groups, that could be additional ways to continue on their journey. And hopefully that's a great support as well. So you can see in this presentation, the focus is on releasing that which doesn't work, embracing that which does, and envisioning our future. Creating that vision and mission, so being more specific at that point, and then creating an action plan. I had two terms listed, two therapists and theorists listed rather at the beginning of today, and we could certainly apply to more theorists as well, but I wanted to touch base on Erik Erikson, which I know we've talked about a bit more, and Jean Piaget. So there's others that we could reference as well, but one of the reasons I like to come back to these two individuals is this idea that they're within the history of developmental psychology. They're important names to know and reference, and even to look at where we are today, because their thoughts have created a lens through which a lot of therapy and theories that are with us today originally came from. So Jean Piaget is considered the father of developmental psychology. And he came up with this broad cognitive perspective and looked at how we change throughout, from birth through adolescence. And then some individuals have gone beyond him. So when someone says, where did developmental psychology come from? A lot of times Jean Piaget's name is the first that comes to mind. He is extremely linked to Maria Montessori. So they're both considered constructivists, meaning we can't know anything without experiencing it ourselves. So I can talk till I'm blue in the face, but the better way to support as a counselor or a teacher or a friend is to be there with that person and to allow them to have those experiences. Some of what we've talked about now as well is how can I do that in a safe space. So He would be considered a constructivist, and he believed that we not only gain knowledge over time, but we so it's not quantity, it's actually qualitatively different. That is, we think differently at each stage of life, not just more, just different. And so some of the videos that you saw earlier in class highlighted this, where there's a level of lack of understanding of others' perspectives at times in our life. Other theorists have recognized this as well. And as we move through, we get to what might be considered more logical thinking. So sensory motor is the first stage according to Jean Piaget. I'm going to do these really quick so we can get to the meat of this. That means we're experiencing everything through our senses, and symbolic thought is not yet there. As we move closer to getting out of that sensory motor stage, we start thinking in symbols. We also are not differentiated from others at this point. When we think about Keegan's 5 orders, this was something that was highlighted at the beginning of life in that stage theorist as well. The second is pre-operational. This is for many where I've understood myself as myself, but then I might have a very difficult time taking another person's perspective. So it can considered not logical and quite egocentric. And this would typically be, according to Piaget anyway, kind of that 2 to 7-year-old range. The third stage, and there's 4 stages total again, the third stage is concrete operational, and that's where, as long as it's within my experience, my reality, I can think pretty logically about things. Think about children that we work with. By the time they're we'll say 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I know as a teacher as well, I found it easier. I could have some more kind of adult-like conversations. They're separating out reality and fantasy a bit better at that point. And I could, as a helper with those children, I don't know. It was a different dialogue at that point. And then the fourth stage, which Piaget said happened around puberty, is formal operational. So I can think abstractly. I can deduce using kind of experimental types of methods and figure out truth. So some things that we figured out since Jean Piaget's original great work. One thing, he tended to underestimate what a lot of little children could do in terms of their development, and he tended to overestimate, to get to a formal operational thinking at puberty. A lot of individuals might never get there, or as we were talking about with Keegan's model as well, it's not this, even though we call it stages, it's not so clear cut. So we can move back, or there might be some areas of our life where we think very formal operationally, other areas where we're more concrete. And then individuals since him have looked at, and I think this is where we're at in our program and with this idea of goal setting, post-formal operational thinking. So a lot of Piagetians or neo-Piagetians that are looking at cognitive processes throughout the lifespan have said, we can move beyond this deducing and hypothetical thinking and really look at multiple realities, multiple truths, and dualistic types of, and beyond the dualism rather, thinking that is not so clear cut. And there's not always just it's this or it's that, right? So that has been acknowledged since as well. And then Erik Erikson, we know we're moving into relationship, and then also a big part of our adulthood is that generativity versus stagnation. So finding purpose in ourselves, and that could be through our family roles, what we're doing in the world in general, and then also through our work and giving back and doing something beyond ourselves. So those are 2 theorists I wanted to focus on related to adult development and this idea. So one of the things that I have done when working, sorry, it's cut off a little bit. Let me move this over. With working individuals for, before I can think about where I want to be, I need to acknowledge where I've been. And so I've spoken a little bit about how we can ruminate. I mentioned this as well. I know I get stuck on whatever the negatives are, and my old thought patterns that are at the very least no longer serving me, I can get stuck on. So how can I go beyond that? And how can I welcome in the new? So one of the processes that I've done have been to journal that, to possibly have a ceremony where we light fire, where we release that into the universe. And that's an ongoing process, right? We've done some of these things together as well. But we know that we can't hold on to grab hold of something new if we're still holding tightly onto the old. So it's fear-inducing, and yet it's so important. Part of this as well, I've talked about this. We tend to, the expression, it's kind of a ridiculous expression, but throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? We're not looking to get rid of everything that is from our past. So I like using, this was a model where the last individuals I was working with kind of had these three major ideas that they were coming from. But I might use this with someone to say, what was I doing maybe in my work or cognitively? What are some of the things spiritually I've done? And what are some of the things socially that I have done that I want, that I cherish, that is an important part of who I am still. So I'm not, when we think about, we don't need to uproot everything. We can hold on to our healthy roots as well. One of the things that I discussed as well, sorry, this says a champion team will always defeat a team of champions. This idea that we need others, we need community. Probably a lot of you are familiar with him already, but Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So strategies like, being proactive. Think about where I want to be, beginning with the end in mind, in order to get there. First things first means, what's the most important? So sometimes that involves creating a priority list and really clarifying what would be the top things I'm going to work on. Win-win. How can we collaborate? How can we re-envision together? Working to understand others, synergize, putting these ideas together, and then sharpening the saw, meaning continuing to come back to these skills that we're honing. I've done this more when I've worked with a group of individuals, say if I'm trying to help a family create their mission and vision, versus what I might be doing on my own. But again, these are good principles to review. Someone that I've really appreciated is Ernest Holmes. He's a great New Age, old wisdom thinker. And one of his quotes out of many books and things that he wrote was, "We are all immersed in the atmosphere of our own thinking. This decides what shall take place in our lives." So these are all things that we're very familiar with, but something that I've reviewed with those that I've worked with. Getting creative if there's time. We can use materials. That could be tapping into the arts again, tapping into some of those nonverbal ways of expressing ourselves also, and envisioning the future. So as this started happening, one thing that I've done before is gotten seed paper and had those visions written down and literally planted those and watered those as a symbol of what we're trying to create. So releasing the old, maybe again through a burning ceremony and releasing that, and then planting the seeds for the future. This is the bigger part to focus on, and I think it's a wonderful thing to think about for your family, also for yourself individually. This could be related to work or a more entirety of your being. But, what would your vision be? And what would your mission be? How would you write this? Your vision is, a statement about the purpose of what you're about. So what's the broadest way to describe yourself or describe your work? For whom are you doing this work? And then the mission is, how do you get to that vision, right? And it could even include some concrete actions within that. So it's a statement describing that clear change that's resulting from your work. And Stephen Covey did this work with families and then also with individuals. So what needs change and why? What are your strengths and assets? What would success look like to you? I've been honing my vision and mission for a while. I think I shared related to working with children and community and building community. I've had a vision that I've continued to foster and use this mission and vision work to clarify as I'm starting to write my proposal for actually starting a center. So this takes some time. This could be a process of a time, maybe maybe some homework if you're in a school setting, or if you end up employing some of those types of skills, and then returning back, or something that you could give to a family that I think they could work on. You hang it, they reflect on it, put it somewhere in a place of prominence or at home, and work from there. In the last 30 seconds, I'm going to wrap this up, and then I'm going to show 2 other handouts in a second video. But it's really important to anchor that in something that's real. So a lot of times we talk about SMART goals today. So make sure that you're specific enough about your goal for how you're going to get to your mission and vision, that you can measure it, see how you're doing. What actions are you going to take? And then a timeline. Don't make it a year, break it down from there. Again, this is one way to envision ourselves, and I thank you for my for sharing in this short introduction.